Welcome, Ashheads. Sit back, relax, and enjoy. My house was built in 1904. It's a single-family home, wooden frame, sitting on a concrete block foundation. I've been living here for about 12 years. Of all the weird things that my siblings and me have seen or heard in this house over the years, this one's my favorite event. This one happened to my brother. About 10 years ago, my brother and his best friend started playing a garage band, playing mostly Spanish rock alternative music, but in Spanish. His friends could only get together on Sunday afternoons. They would practice into the early evenings, and they would usually call it quits by 8 p.m. This was the time I usually showed up and went to bed because I worked a graveyard shift. This happened in late fall, so the days were getting shorter. They had just finished a long session when the decision to head to someone else's house came about. My brother handed his car keys to his buddy so they could load up the equipment in his car. Everyone had filed out of the basement, but the tricky part was they needed to walk all the way to the back of the basement, up the back stairs, through the kitchen doorway, down the hall into the living room, and then out onto the front porch. Everyone was outside sitting in my brother's truck waiting for him. My brother was walking up the back stairs when he remembered that he had left his pancakes on a speaker down in the basement. He made the decision to go back and retrieve them. Now the basement is not clean. There had been partitions made, and the boiler and main heating unit were right smack dab in the middle. So after my brother walks back, he's about to retrieve his food container when out of the corner of his eye, he sees it. It is a shadowy figure, right at his peripheral vision. This feeling of dread and uneasiness washed over my brother. We had been taught that if you're in the presence of a spirit or a ghost and you feel a bad vibe, that you should say a quick prayer or cuss at it. My brother chose the second. He basically just told it, "Hey, fuck you, and I don't have time for this shit." My brother started to walk to the back of the basement, briskly up the stairs, closing doors and turning lights off as he walked out. The last light switch is on the opposite side of the front door. Luckily, the door was open, and the light from the street lamp was flooding the living room with its amber light. My brother said he felt like something was at his back, but at no point did he dare turn around. As he flicked the last light switch in the living room, it went dark, as did the rest of the house. As he stepped out and pulled the door closed behind him, still holding his food container in one hand, he jogged down the few porch steps. He walked towards the front gate. Our house resides far from the main street, especially having such a large front yard and no rear garage. As he closed the gap between himself and his truck, he kind of smiled and thought things over in his head, mad at himself for spooking himself out when there was no reason. He climbed into the driver's side of the truck, putting on his seatbelt and getting ready to pull out of the parking spot directly in front of the house, when one of his friends asked, "Hey, wait, what about your brother? Isn't he coming with us?" My brother answered, "What do you mean? He went to work early this morning. He's already gone. Do you see his car somewhere?" The next question they asked me still haunts me today. "So then who was the one walking behind you when you left the house?" My older sister has had a ghost that's followed her around for years. I lived with her once for about 3 months, and so much weird stuff happened in that time. All my sister would say to me when I mentioned it was that her ghost friend didn't like me being there. Things like going to bed with everything locked up and switched off, and then waking up in the morning with the back door wide open, lights on, and kettle switched on. One night my sister and I were getting ready to go out, and I'd asked her to borrow her liquid foundation. I used it and put it back where she kept her makeup. 10 minutes later, she's asking me for it, and it's nowhere to be seen. She accused me of taking it and made me buy her a new one, and completely refused to listen to my side of the story. About a year or so later, I was packing up to move out of the house, and she found the makeup in a shoebox with some old letters. The shoebox was in a zipped-up suitcase that was underneath her bed. But probably the most scared I ever felt was one afternoon when I was the only one in the house, which never really happened because 4 people lived there. I'd arrived home from work and headed straight up to the bathroom. All the doors and windows were tightly closed. I was standing in the bathroom and started squeezing a pimple on my chin when I heard a female voice in the hallway say,
"Stop picking your zits."
It was loud enough and sounded real enough at the time to make me think it was my sister, so I laughed and told her to fuck off and asked what she was doing for dinner. I heard no answer. I stuck my head out into the hallway. No one was there. I searched the house top to bottom. There was no one home. I sat out on the front porch until someone got home because I didn't want to be there alone. This is a story I do not tell often. I promise sincerely it has scared me for life, and although I have looked into psychological explanations for what I heard and natural explanations for what occurred, they remain unsatisfactory. When I was a child, I was scared of the dark. I swore to my mother I heard voices in it. They were not necessarily evil, but they were not familiar to me, so they scared me. It was not uncommon in the middle of the night for me to wake up and hear whispers, as I would call them, when I would ask my mom about them. She figured they were just bumps in the night and typical kid nightmare material. I tried often to explain to her that this was more than that they sounded different from the way people's voices do. On some nights I would get so scared from these whispers that I would sleep in my mom's bed with her. It added an extra bonus that the bathroom was directly outside of her bedroom door for my late-night bathroom runs. I should add at this point that when walking out of the hallway to go into the bathroom, you look directly down the stairs that would lead into the living room on the first floor, as my mom's bedroom is on the second floor. On one such night, around Christmas, I awoke the need and felt the need to go to the bathroom. I walked out from the door and distinctly heard the phrase, "Look!" and to my astonishment, a red light, almost like a spotlight, was casted upon the wall at the very bottom of the stairs. The light had no other source. It was by itself, and I was amazed by it. Being such a little kid and it only being a few days away from Christmas, I knew what this light was. It was Santa. How else could he get into my house to know that I'm a good boy? I was so excited. I began walking down the stairs to greet him, picking up my pace after the second step as the light began to creep off the wall and fade into the darkness of my living room. That's when I heard him. A very strong, masculine voice, different from the first, not at all like my father's. Not to say he isn't masculine, it was just definitely different. It said,
"Stop. Right now. Go back up those stairs."
I listened, turned around, and what happened next I am not sure I would believe if someone would tell me in a scary story. After reaching the top of the stairs, I heard a very loud crash that sent me running into my mom's bed, where I jumped straight under the covers and stayed there for the whole night. When we woke up the next morning, the little red Christmas lights that my mom had put on the railing that goes down the stairs were pulled down to the bottom of the stairs, some broken from what seemed a forceful tear, lying in a single pile. The dry sink in the living room had fallen from the wall. My mother could not explain it. My father was worried we had been a victim of home invasion. My sister started crying. There was nothing missing. Nobody had broken in. There didn't seem to be any reason that any of this had happened. And then I saw it, and I kept quiet because I was so afraid I could not force words out of my mouth. There, on the edge of the wooden dry sink which had been facing up, were 3 indentations where the finish on the wood had been worn down, almost as if someone had a forceful grip. Someone down there had grabbed the sink and thrown it down. That was what that bang was. I was mortified. After that day I never heard a single voice again. I do not like to think or imagine what was waiting for me downstairs that night, if anything at all, but I can tell you that the reality was that something had physically acted upon 2 things in my house near the bottom of that stairwell. After this, I had never heard another whisper again, which is kind of sad because in some ways I would have liked to thank the man that had stopped me from going down those stairs. This happened to me when I was 7. I am 20 years old now, and because of this incident, I am still afraid of the dark, especially shadowy stairwells. I was babysitting my niece once a while back while staying at my brother's place, and they had a baby camera set up so I could see her on the little TV it came with. I was studying and was almost about to doze off when I heard some whispering and realized it was coming from the monitor. I initially thought it was just some feedback or something, but when I looked at the TV a bit closer, there was a dark shadow near my niece's crib. I had never been more terrified in my life, but the shadow was clearly there and it had not been there before. I ran to my niece's room and looked around, but saw nothing. I took her the hell out of there. I went back to the TV and the shadow was gone. I told my brother what happened and he pulled me aside and told me not to mention it to my sister-in-law because she would freak out, but that he had seen the same thing several times now, and also with the whispering. They stayed in that house for about 4 more years, and just when my niece was learning to talk, she would tell her mom about her special friend. To this day, it still scares the shit out of me. When they moved out, my brother told me that my niece had become inconsolably sad because she would miss her friend. Her mom would tell her that she could bring him along, but she would always say that he couldn't leave the house. We never to this day told her about that damn shadow, and she apparently never saw it. I didn't know that's what it was called until much later. I was living in a house in Laguna Beach that had been there since the 1920s. In its history, it had been a speakeasy, a brothel, and a house for smuggling illegal immigrants. One day, my new wife and I were having an argument. I can't even recall exactly what it was about, but she walked out the house and down the block to get a cup of coffee to cool off. And there I was, in the house, alone. The way the place was built was incredibly haphazard. There was a bedroom and a living room on one side, then a bathroom with 2 entrances. On the other side of the bathroom there was a hallway that had windows in one side and 2 bedrooms on the other. From my bedroom, I could look across the hall into the bathroom, then through the bathroom and down to the other hall. I was standing at my dresser and I had just noticed movement out of the corner of my eye and looked down there. There it was. And honest to God, this still gives me the goosebumps after 17 years just typing it. A black figure. It was maybe 3 feet tall, and it was only vaguely humanoid. It looked like black scribbles, like someone had scribbled a human shape, but the scribbles moved, like electricity arcing. That's the best way I can describe it. There was no sound that I could remember. I just distinctly remember that when I saw it, I wasn't afraid. I was just like, what the fuck? Then it noticed me looking at it. I can't say it turned around, it just focused on me. Then I was scared. I didn't move, didn't scream, nothing. I was just frozen, because it just fucking came at me. It rushed down the hall towards me. I have no idea what it intended, but as soon as it entered the bathroom, the door closest to me just slammed shut. I screamed. I yelled for my wife. She wasn't home. I went the fuck outside into the daylight and didn't go back inside until about 10 minutes later when she got home. I don't believe in ghosts. I don't believe I saw anything supernatural, but I know I saw something, and I do not know what it was.